I'm Paul Ingbretson. I'm a full-time artist and a teacher of painting. I also served as a New Hampshire state representative for 6 terms beginning in 2003. I'm one of a number of concerned citizens, including other former and current New Hampshire state legislators, who are very concerned about the unprecedented usurpation of legislative authority by our Supreme Court in the now infamous Claremont decisions of 1993 and 1997. We've come together to produce a series of podcasts that will lay out the facts and evidence for your consideration. We'll be hearing from some of the best legal minds in our state who have followed the issue from the beginning. Our goal is to create public awareness of the serious separation of powers implications of the Claremont decisions, with the hope of generating active public resistance to it and to any future such judicial overreach. All right, my guest today is very recently former Senator Bob Giuda, and he's the senator from my district, and he served in the House with me years before that. And Bob, I don't know what else I should say about you, but I know you have a background in the Navy and the FBI. You're an airline pilot. You must have been a flyer in the Navy, I guess, huh? And just wanted to give some background, and then we'll go straight into good old Claremont.
Sure. Well, born and raised in basically New Jersey and North, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. We were fleeing the metropolis, right? Yeah. Naval Academy graduate, Marine Corps pilot, carrier-based pilot. Left the Marine Corps. I met a young lady, and we decided that she was a Navy nurse, and I was a Marine Corps pilot, and we met and decided we were going to pursue a family, which is not, at the time, the service was not conducive to that.
Yeah.
So we both jettisoned our careers. And
for the family, wow. Yeah.
I went to work as an FBI agent for a couple of years. Yeah. Didn't care for it. Federal bureaucracy of investigation. And went to work for United Airlines and did that for 31 years.
So you flew those kinds of planes that come flying into the aircraft carrier and get hooked up on the...
Not into, onto. Slight distinction.
Yeah, I guess not being a flyer, I wouldn't know the difference. That's why you don't want me up there being a flyer. Well, that's pretty fun.
I've had a blessed life. I really have.
How many flights would you have made into, or even landings, just say something like, because it's such a cool thing to see a landing.
Oh, on the carriers?
Yeah, on a carrier. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know, 100 to 150.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty wonderful. And were you involved in conflicts?
I was not directly. I did fly missions that were electronic surveillance missions over the Southeast Asian Peninsula after Vietnam, looking for POWs.
Right.
And they were so compartmentalized. They were ordered by the president. We were under direct command of the president of the United States. They were ordered. I knew where we were going, and my electronic countermeasures officer knew what we were looking for. Neither of us knew what the other guy knew.
Wow.
They would walk the black boxes out under armed Marine Corps guard, load them in. These were night missions, right? We taxi up to the catapults, boom, get shot off, tank on the way in, do the mission, come back, tank on the way back, and then land.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
sporty. It's fun having you aboard here, Bob.
Thank you.
Yeah, most recently we spoke with Ed Mosca, who was the counsel to the House. I think when we were both right? That was that big year that the Republicans had 280 reps, and we managed to squeak the wonderful Bill O'Brien into the speakership. I say that because I know how many people out there just despise, but they're the same people who love Claremont that despise Bill O'Brien and what we were trying to do. But that fantastic budget that we got, just amazing, the kind of
I wasn't there when Bill was the speaker.
Oh, you weren't there that year? Okay.
No. My brother was, but I wasn't.
Oh, okay, yeah. And, but Bob, you, because the Senate, you're being a senator in particular, but you also were there in the House during several times when this comes up over and over again, the Claremont issue. Give us a startup. What's your general take with that background? What's your general take on what the heck is going on here?
I think the first general take is that we had a state Supreme Court that was extremely liberal in its definition of the word cherish.
Right.
They turned cherish into money. And I think that was the beginning of the problem.
Interesting way to say that. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Although I cherish my wife and I do give her my...
That's evidence of it.
But the fact is that the court has many times overreached, in my opinion, its constitutional authority.
Right.
And Claremont decisions were clearly clearly one instance of those which have have tied the state in knots now for 25 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you're this confluence of issues where you have people whose property taxes are getting untenable.
Right.
You have an education system that is absolutely rapacious in its appetite for dollars, regardless of results.
Yeah, and for votes in the town hall to get them.
And you have a federal government with a Department of Education, which has far exceeded its, I would say, its capabilities.
Right.
They issue mandates. They issue, you can have money, but only if. Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
They don't train a single student. 40% of the Department of Education, federal department's budget, is administration and personnel. Yeah. 40%.
That's an incredible thing.
And I hear people talk about, they're going to get rid of the Department of Education. We're going to, you're not going to lose money. You're probably going to get much more money from the feds without the strings, because they'll hopefully come down in the form of block grants.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay? Yeah. It goes to the states, and then your state legislature, okay, will decide how that money gets used. And I'm convinced it will be significantly more. Okay?
Well, let's just focus for a second now. You set up that thing. We're talking about the burden, and we're feeling it as taxpayers, as property owners. I wrote a pretty strident letter. I don't know if I shared it with you, to the editor, telling old folks to just get used to it and go and die, and because they're going to lose their homes. It's okay, because it's all for education. It's all for a good purpose. You know,
we had our town meeting in Warren, and just this week ago. And we had a EMS crisis and a very significant addition to the town side of the budget.
Right.
And so the people there opted to cut $169,000 out of a $2.9 million education budget.
Yeah.
And people were up in arms. And I wrote a response on Facebook to a post from a just recently retired from the school board, who was railing, the kids aren't going to have this and the kids aren't going to have that, and we're going to cut. And I said, schools are part of a community. Right. And when the community suffers a financial hardship, the schools should participate in that. That is part of a sound education.
Yeah.
Because individuals, families, and communities and schools, when things get tight, you tighten your belt. Instead of railing about it, I would use that as a point of instruction to our students. As to prudent fiscal planning and management.
Well, you remember when we were in the House at one point, we had the other party was standing before us saying, we're going to decide on where we need to, what things we need to do, and we'll figure out where the money's going to come from later. I get the sense that there's a mindset there that's very much characteristic of what is driving all this spending in the
One
schools.
of the problems
it's a dream. It's like a dream thing,
One of the
Tell
problems
me your dreams
with
and I'll
education,
get to the taxes.
Paul, is you've heard the phrase, it's about the children.
Right.
Look, everybody
sure.
loves kids, right?
Everybody's
But
got
that
some.
should not make you excuse them from the consequences of reality.
Yeah.
And that's what the education system has done.
Yeah.
They insulate them, and they not only they indoctrinate them.
Right.
All right, and so school funding, minus the federal strictures, I think is going to be a lot better. I think we're going to see more money, not less. And I think ultimately it's really not about the money to me.
Okay.
I mean, yes, it is to people, but you have to look beyond that. You have to look at what's happening in the court system.
So this is the primary issue.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have a court that is going to decide purportedly whether or not an inferior court has ruled that X dollars equals adequate funding for education. Right. Well, that is a flagrant, and if I may use the word violent, violation of the constitutional separation of powers in our state constitution, where the legislature exclusively is the authority on how to spend money.
Right.
Okay. And so here are the courts.
Well,
again,
policy and money.
Right. And so, the courts are going to step in and try to fix an ill in spite of or in opposition to
in the face of
the elected representatives of the people, who have clearly been given a clear mandate, relatively speaking, this term.
Right.
Okay. Right. And if people elect people They are the ones they want making the laws, not officiating on laws from the bench.
Yeah.
Okay, activist judges. This should be thrown out of court because it has no business. The courts have no business dictating to the legislature. Now, that's the first problem. Then we get into what I sometimes call a feckless legislature. People in elected office
Don't go past the courts too fast. We'll come back to them.
Okay. But you have legislators who don't know the power they have, and they bow down to the black-robed oligarchy, right?
Yes.
No. You can tell the courts no.
Right.
Because there may be a Supreme Court, but it's not supreme over the other branches of government. It's supreme over the court system.
Right.
Okay, they're co-equal branches, and for a reason.
Right.
So the legislature needs to just say no.
Yeah. Just say it's not in your bailiwick. It's not your job.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's been problematical. We just dance around. We sort of say no, but we don't say it with the word no.
Yeah.
But that's one of the interesting things. At one point I was pulling up the names of all these judges because, including an 82-year-old guy that shouldn't have even been on the bench, but a guy who was being impeached at the time,
Right.
I mean, like, what kind of a motley crew did we have there in the first place?
Right. Right.
But without any doubt, they just had made some. And another one of the people in my interview phase here said, "Don't you see that?" Maybe it was Muska. He said, "Don't you see that in 1972 there was this decision, and then all of a sudden all these states were trying this trick, getting the courts to decide where the spending was going to go."
Right.
And they were getting away with it time after time after time across the states. As many as 20 states.
We have to draw a clear line of demarcation, and if that means standing in defiance of a court,
right,
then you do it. That's your role. That's your responsibility as a legislator who took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, which clearly stipulates the legislature gets to set policy and funding.
Right. It's the taxpayers' money. It's our government and all that sort of stuff. These unelected guys, et cetera, et cetera.
It's not difficult, but it may be distasteful to have to tell the court, sorry, as Andrew Jackson did, how many divisions do you have?
Yeah, but I mean, why is it so difficult?
Because we're raised that the Supreme Court is supreme. And
you think that's what it is? You
part
think
of that, sure.
Hypnotized?
We don't want to be, we avoid confrontation.
Yeah.
As a rule, we don't like confrontation. This is
let
a
me put it
direct...
to you a different way. You're a Navy guy.
Marine
guy. Oh, if I put you in the Navy.
The men's department of the Navy.
I'm not getting in that one. I was stuck in the Army. So I was going to ask you, Bob, we have a, why do you get into the Army? It's because you're a macho guy. And this thing about power is an element of that. It's about expressing yourself as a male. There's something about that. Does that disappear with old age? Is it beta males that get into the State House?
No.
I mean, why in the heck? I don't believe that it's a mama may I thing. Boys aren't like that. We aren't like that. It's not our thing to
think
to
about
mama may I.
how you get elected. You don't get elected if you're confrontational. You don't get elected if you're hardline on issues. Okay, and there are issues that you have in campaign, and
so you're saying we get the wrong guys in, basically, or you learn to soften up and you become the wrong guy.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
The other thing I found
that makes some sense.
in the House, and to a degree in the Senate. Okay. First term guys, gals come in and they get fire in the belly. By the time they're into their second term, you have the 20 committees in the House, and you have however many, 18 in the Senate. Wait a minute. You start out, okay, we're going to fix this, we're going to fix that, and we're going to take it. And by your second term, you're all of a sudden, instead of the advocate of the people reigning in government, you're now co-opted by the agencies to support them in levying further regulations on the people. It happens over and over.
Or the general construct of the party itself, whatever it is, or the leadership and their agendas.
So, revolution is revolution. That's how we were formed.
Yeah, but still, put it this way now. I'm doing this because I actually am thinking it through, wondering about it this way. That is, so you stand there, you could be a speaker. Now, when Bill O'Brien was there, he said to the Senate, he said, either you settle down and stop doing this 14% budget, you come down to my 3% budget, or you ain't going to see one bill come through the House successfully. And we know what happened? Now, he just did it. He's the first guy that I've known that acted, but of course he was only in there for a brief period of time. Right. But he was the first guy I've ever seen in the House that actually... I have to say that may not be true precisely, because I think Chandler did something once that was in that direction. But don't you see what I'm saying? Isn't that the moment you live for? You get into that position of power and then you don't use it. So
Well,
I'm just asking you, to you reps out there,
as a
it's a
body,
serious question.
as bodies, the House and the Senate need to use their power.
And as leadership, they need to be the guts.
Right, and I'd be
care
happy
who
to.
they are.
I have a little letter I've prepared that maybe we can cover now or later. Your choice. I don't care. That
No, it's right on top of what we're dealing with. You have a letter. You have a letter that does what? You have the letter they ought to be writing. You have the macho letter?
I do.
You're out of the Senate now, so you get to be macho. They're going to laugh at you for that.
Oh, I was very clear in the Senate. Nobody was any doubt about my positions on anything.
No, I'm sure.
And so,
By the way, I would say about Bob, but he's always been that. You've always been that way. You're the first guy I've ever seen that could change a vote on the floor, almost predictably, and actually be ready to be up and be enough informed to be right enough to be on top of it enough for people to respect what you were saying. But I want to say that's a pretty significant thing. And so I don't in any way undervalue you, having been in there for so long even.
thank you. So
what? Let's go to your letter.
okay, so this is a letter that I would have the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate each sign. One letter, 2 signatures.
Good. I can't wait to hear this.
Honorable Justices.
We should be printing it on the page here.
Yeah. As the elected leaders of the New Hampshire House and Senate, we, the undersigned, write to inform you that the legislative branch will not be implementing the court's recent ruling on education funding as adjudicated in the Conval lawsuit.
Right.
We do so to remind the court that the New Hampshire Constitution clearly and unambiguously assigns the issue of taxation and education funding to the legislature. Were we to comply with your decision, we would be subjecting the citizens of New Hampshire to a dangerous precedent by allowing the judiciary to usurp the exclusive constitutional authority of the legislature in such matters.
Yeah.
The House and Senate, duly elected by the people of New Hampshire, will retain exclusive jurisdiction over matters of fiscal policy. Respectfully, Sherman Packard, Speaker, Sharon Carson, President.
So that wasn't so hard. That wasn't so hard.
That's it.
It doesn't even take much guts.
No,
It
but
just makes a statement of fact.
right.
The only thing you didn't have in there is that we have an oath that we already swore to do what the Constitution says, and there is separation of powers.
Well,
it's clearly, really clearly written.
Were you to ask the 400 members of the House how many of you have read the Constitution in its entirety and understand it, I'd suspect that there would be a significant minority.
Yeah.
And the same in the Senate.
Yeah. It should be a requirement to get in. You should have to pass a test, frankly. Your constituents should make you pass it.
Yeah, for sure. But the constituents don't know. Mm-hmm. We've had it so good for so long that government has been on autopilot.
Yeah, I know.
And government's function.
Well, that's the miracle of the kind of government our founders set up, isn't it?
Well,
that it actually could survive this long.
If you had people in government that understood that its intent was to be limited, and that freedom was to be paramount, not restriction, not regulation, not government intrusion into things. So that was lost a long time ago.
Well, no, but I'm saying that the construct is such
that
it took a very long time to get here to the point where we're now having to discuss this.
100 years, probably 115 years or so. Back when Teddy Roosevelt got elected, right? And ever since, it's been progression. A bit, and FDR was what they call it, the Great Leap Forward in socialism. All well intentioned. All well intentioned. It was maybe it was Franklin or Adams, somebody that said that more liberty has been lost to well-intended legislators than to every battle ever fought in the history of mankind. Okay.
Yep.
Road to hell is paved with good intentions, my mom used to say. And
there's somebody else, one of our founders said it's in the nature of things for the government to keep on taking and for the people to keep on giving up rights. It's just in the nature of things, somebody said.
Jefferson said.
Is that Jefferson?
No, this is what he said.
Yeah.
Government by its very nature is inimical to the rights of a free people.
There you go. By its very nature. So what George Washington called it, the dangerous fire.
Right.
It's a necessary evil.
Yeah. Government, like fire, is a wonderful servant and a terrible master.
A fearful master.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty summary. That really is it. So
the question arises then, all right, so as a people, okay, as the people of the state, do we let our pocketbooks which are a factor, no question,
Right.
become the means by which we surrender the constitutional separation of powers that gives our legislatures the authority to make laws and then to fund things and not.
Right. So you're saying there's a certain tendency among the people. Maybe it's the security quote. You give up liberty for security, you get neither.
Right.
But you're talking about the dollars thing, and everybody in this town, will, for example, will be simply saying, well, not my kids. We're not going to give it up for my kids. But in the meantime, this is a systematic thing that's starting to happen now, where you're actually giving up your very right to determine the laws of your own country, or even the meaning of the Constitution.
If you let the courts rule and you follow it in this instance.
So there's a time, right? What you're really saying, there's a time for the body politic, for the people, to say, all right, we're gonna accept no more money. Let's start talking about what we're losing over here that's going to cost us way more than the money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
By the way, everybody knows, we've been watching since the 70s. Education's costs are tripled since the 70s. And they've flatlined. There's absolutely no improvement in education since the 70s.
And by the way,
including in the first Claremont decision that keeps on going on the same trajectory. And,
by the way,
the
number of students is down from like 225,000 to 169. Maybe there's been an uptick in the last couple of years. Yeah. So far less students, way more money, and no discernible change in outcomes.
Well, I think that tripling was a per capita tripling, including, though, the inflation,
Right.
So it's not a funny number.
Right.
It's a real number that includes the...
Right.
So for people, that's the thing that people really need to get, and that's what I really respect about who you are. You're the people's representative in both houses at different times, and you get... That's what needs to be represented. The truth is that you're not getting a better education. We're spending a ton more money. Kids are flatlining. We're now graduating, according to the dean when I was in the education committee, the dean of the university system said we are now graduating illiterates. And he said, we're definitely graduating from high school, but we're now graduating from college.
Sure.
Illiterates.
Sure.
This is the public school system you're paying 3 times more for. And it's gone only... So the line of, the progression, literacy rates and all that sort of stuff are like 50% literacy rate. It's like bad. And it stays there. There's no improvement. So people don't get this. It's the dumbest thing. But we're going to give up our rights for that? We're going to give up our control as a people of the policies and the taxation?
Well, look, they've done it at the local. How many people go to a school board meeting?
Yeah.
How many people go to a selectmen's meeting?
Yeah.
In terms of percentage of the population.
Well,
but I'm
everybody
saying
in town is working for the
citizens, the hell with the
schools.
teachers, right?
No, I'm saying the
citizens.
I know.
Right?
I know.
They don't participate.
Yes.
And if you don't, mischief happens. Who does participate are the progressives, the liberals, the leftists,
and
the
teachers,
the unions,
the staff,
the SAU folks. Right.
Yeah.
And so, to be fair, a lot of the funding increases requirements are federal mandates for.
And we can pray
There's
and hope
some
those
schools
are
where
going
there are
away.
more aides than there are teachers.
Yes, I've seen that.
Okay, that's ridiculous.
The whole principle of educable child. My daughter was in a classroom where there's a guy there on a bed, on a gurney, couldn't move his head, couldn't do anything. I don't even think he could blink his eyes. I mean, maybe that's what he could do. And this guy was taking tests for him who was standing next to his bed. He had some magic connection to this guy.
The road to
the guy
hell
was getting $30,000 for one student.
Paid with good intentions. Our sympathy goes out to these children,
and we become victims of somebody else's good intentions, don't we?
Exactly.
The uneducable is a big issue.
Now the thing, special ed money is not being taken out of the Department of Education. Okay, the Pell Grants.
But they're not coming up to the spending. We're spending more and more every year on special ed.
Right, but
and
think
the
about
feds
40.
Aren't giving the rest of it to us. We're not getting it all.
Right. What the numbers used to be, I think they were supposed to pay up to 40%. The best we ever saw was 22%.
I didn't get that high. I thought it was 17%. Okay.
Got that high. I don't know where it is now.
Yeah.
But get rid of that 40% of administrative and personnel costs in the Department of Education. Yeah. I don't know what its budget is, $36 billion maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But 40%, that's a big number. And that will fund special needs. Federal grant for special needs. Boom, right to the school districts, okay? Not to somebody doing a thesis on the transgender implications of the fruit fly. It's like the stuff that's money's been spent
That was
on.
U.S. aid money, I think.
Well, yeah, that too. But I mean, I guarantee you, there's transgender stuff in the Department of Education's former budgets. You know.
Is there, in your mind, is there stuff people anybody watching this should do to get the pressure onto their reps and senators? I mean, you were one of those guys. What was beneficial? What did you listen to, or what caused you to change your mind at all ever?
I listened to myself, and I only because.
Well, so watch out who you elect.
Right. People trusted me, and they elect you because they trust your judgment.
Yeah.
Or they pretend to. I don't know. But you need.
Well, you look harmless enough.
You need to write to your representatives and your state senators, and tell them, okay, that you're not willing to sacrifice your right of representation in the formation of policy and the funding thereof
to unelected bureaucrats
for the sake of school funding, which has continued to increase despite the results decreasing and the number of students as well.
So you're saying that writing letters is beneficial?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No form letters. I used to just.
How about letters to the editor? Is that beneficial?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you know, and Facebook's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
But you have to have courage. Stand up to the educrats, right? Well, the teachers, well, you know what? Like it or not, teachers work 9 months of the year.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, we have to do things in the summer. Yeah, you do. You get a 1 or 2 week course that we pay for, taxpayers, and you get extra credits. You can get more money from the system, right? Yeah. No. We don't disrespect the teachers, but at the same token, how about a metric for the quality of their work? Mm-hmm. How about a metric? I suggested a bill when I was in the House.
Yeah.
It said that a teacher in a certain discipline should have to take and pass the SAT in that discipline, whether it was math, or literature, or English, whatever.
That's a no-brainer. We know that a lot of times math isn't being taught by people.
It was like the hounds of hell were loosed. Because why should we have to be qualified? We went to teachers' college. Hey, you know what? That's great. Yeah. That doesn't make you qualified.
Don't bet on it being great, by the way.
Right.
That's where they get radicalized.
And so again, there's a lot wrong with our system. What's right with our system is education freedom accounts. Okay.
Right.
And then you'll be told, well, the district is losing money because the state funding component is going to the parents who then choose where their child goes to school.
Right.
Which, in my opinion, is the way it's supposed to be.
In other words, competition instead of monopolies.
Absolutely.
You didn't bring that up, but the monopolies question is a hot one.
It is.
It has come up before and it'll come up again, but that's one of those things that the courts just managed not to address in that issue.
Right.
But one of the things we're trying to do is not have monopolies. And the public school system isn't absolutely a monopoly.
Yeah. Very tightly woven, too.
You know, it's a kind of monopoly where, you know, it's not so much that they dominate it, but it's that they can, by law, force you to go. You're too poor to go to pay for your own schools.
We're changing that.
Mandatory education is a disaster.
Yeah, we're changing that, Paul, with education freedom accounts. Okay, the subscription to that program is through the roof.
Oh, good.
And the legislatures continue to expanding
what about
eligibility.
Strings attached? A lot of people are talking about strings attached, and that's a big worry to me, to a homeschooler, for example.
Like what?
Well, I'm just saying, in the long run,
homeschoolers are required to be tested every year anyway.
No, but are they going to be in that position though, where if you're not teaching sex ed, and have this list of crap that you're going to have to do?
Because you know what? You, the parent, will get to choose where your child goes. That's it. The money doesn't go to the school. The money goes to the parents.
As long as there's clarity about that.
The U.S. Supreme Court ruled on that a year or two ago in a case out of Maine. That Maine challenged EFAs, so to speak.
And they wanted to live up to their...
And they said, no. The money is... They said that the challenge was that the money was going to private and religious institutions. Mm-hmm. And the court said, no. The money is going to the parents, who are ultimately in charge and responsible for the education of the child, they will be the arbiters of whether that child goes to a religious school, a secular, or anything else.
I'm just quoting you what someone said to me recently. You know,
it's settled law to the Supreme Court level.
That's interesting and good thing.
Look at the disparity between cost of the system that the public teachers
That's about where I was going to go. You know I was going to go there, yes.
And not only the cost disparity, which is like a third, but the results, parochial school kids and private school kids, far and away,
those kids are almost like back in the 50s
on
and
test
60s.
Scores anything the public schools produce.
No, that's right. well, you know what the public schools say? That's because you don't get the trouble kids and all that sort of stuff. But they often do.
Yeah.
They often do get the trouble kids. That's why they're there.
Right.
Actually,
And in fact, I know the program that we have in New Hampshire, I can't think of the name of it. It was interesting because then Senator Feltus from Concord came aboard, and he and a couple other senators tried to divert money from this, if you will, low-income assistance to poor families to a different program. They wanted to devote to vocational ed at the college level. Okay? And I'll never forget her. The gal that runs that program was there testifying. I was chairing Ways and Means, right? And Senator Feltus had this amendment, and we were challenging the amendment. And the girl looked at Senator Feltus and said, Senator Feltus, a month ago, when you were campaigning in our town, you were totally in support of this program when you were in front of the people that are less than fortunate in terms of financial means. Right. Why are you changing your mind on the committee that's overseeing the bill to support that program? You know what his response was? He turned red and he said, I'll ask the questions here. That was a game, set,
match. He got
match.
his answer. Red was the answer, yeah.
Yeah, and so, again, the public schools can be a lot better. I am a believer, and I put this in an op-ed in the Union Leader, there should be no public sector unions. You have a monopoly.
Oh, no, that's for sure.
Okay, that includes schools, fire departments, police departments, and the state government and county government.
Yeah.
You got a monopoly.
Yeah.
Okay, the only reason you unionize is to leverage pay increases for yourself, better benefits, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And then you really work to get more people involved because then your union's bigger and stronger.
Right.
Which is what the explosion of our schools is often about.
So,
or related to, at least.
Anyway, we're sort of diverging, but let's get back to...
but I wanted to do this at some point, and I didn't think it was going to be you, but it was the money thing isn't... See, the courts, it starts with Claremont and money. It's all about this, and something to do with equity or fairness or some stupid thing. But in the meantime, we're not getting, the kids aren't getting educated, no matter how much money we put out there, it's not helping. So we obviously have a whole different problem, and I would have, instead of, let's just put it this way, Bob, that it's not irrelevant that we're talking about the money, but it isn't the point of this thing. The point of this thing is to clarify one big issue, and that is, who do these courts think they are? When I was talking to Mosca, the word corruption came up. Now, my thinking is, if you're corrupting the Constitution, that's corruption. If you're making stuff up, if you're defining words, and putting rights where they, and taking, et cetera, and changing the Constitution around. So amending the Constitution by interpretation, that's corruption. That's what we're talking about right now.
There's a fascinating video I watched last night. Pam Bondi in a court in Florida with a judge who told her to take off the cross that she was wearing on a necklace.
Okay.
And she didn't. Came in the next day and he said, if you don't take it off, I'm going to fine you. Mm-hmm. And to be terse, she schooled him in the First Amendment.
Okay.
And he went behind the scenes to the Bar Association, and they were going to censure her for disrespecting him in his courtroom. She went to the press, and the next thing you know, the judge is backpedaling very fast because he had been untruthful. He had been disrespectful of the Constitution, First Amendment right. Okay? So again, the courts quietly have a tendency to, we call it mission creep. Expand their powers, right, at the expense of, there's only two places they can take them from, the executive branch or the legislative branch, right? Yeah. We're watching that battle, interestingly, being fought at the federal level as well.
Yes.
You have a local federal district court judge stopping an executive order by the President of the United States, who's elected and doing the will of the people very clearly, like deporting these thugs, murderers, thieves, and rapists out of here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Oh, yeah.
And so this is an issue that's coming up. And Chief Justice Roberts, is suspect in my mind.
Yeah, the blackmailed probably.
Okay.
Roberts,
because the indication I got from the comments that he made was that, because Trump said they need to impeach that judge.
Right.
And Roberts' comments were something, well, impeachment is not normally reserved. It's reserved for something, more serious or different. And I'm going, what is more serious?
Yeah.
What is more serious than violating the separation of powers in the Constitution?
Well, now you're talking Claremont.
Yeah, exactly.
What's more serious?
It's analogous.
There
It's state level, federal level.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's really right to the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to, I was looking over here trying to find the names of these judges. I really like doing this. I mean, I say that. The present judges we have, there's two guys, somebody said, maybe it was Lynn or somebody, there are basically probably two judges on each side of this issue, and there's some hanging judge. I'm talking about the New Hampshire Supreme Court. My question is, you brought up the issue, and we haven't talked about it yet, but the issue of where this is going to go, and that is we're going to wind up with a broad-based tax. We're going to talk about an income tax, who knows what, because the demands are going to be such that you can't do it any other way, right? So my question is, do these present judges want to be the ones that have the income tax hung around their necks when they screw up New Hampshire that way?
I think there's a better question.
Well, wait a second. Though.
Okay.
But I just wanted to do this because I find this useful. The former justices were Justice David Brock. These are the usurpers. Right. These people that started this whole thing.
Right.
It was David Brock, it was William Batchelder, it was Sherman Horton Jr., it was William Johnson, and it was an 82-year-old William Alvan Grimes who shouldn't have been there at all. And they all were being corrupt when they allowed him to stay on there with that decision coming up. He replaced Thayer, and I don't know why they replaced him with an 82-year-old guy instead of some young stud who they could have controlled anyway. It wouldn't have been any big issue. What were they doing? So I'm telling you they were corrupt from the beginning because they allowed an 82-year-old guy on there. But I'm saying that's their names: Brock, Batchelder, Horton, Johnson, and Grimes. And what I'm saying to you is I'm going to start saying the names of these other guys over there because if there's an income tax in this state, it's going to be directly the cause of the gutlessness of our legislature, unwilling to stand up and take their place, and the usurpation and the arrogance and the hubris of five or three. I mean, just imagine 3 judges can do this over the entire body politic. So yeah, go where you're going. I just wanted to make sure I said their names.
If the body politic allows it.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so let's talk about if the Supreme Court of New Hampshire, rules that the judiciary has the authority to dictate the amount of funding that comprises an adequate education. Like, money doesn't equal adequacy, but
that's a brilliant point.
Disregard that point, right? I mean, then the legislature does not say no, simple letter to follow, right?
Right.
Let's look at the other states that have implemented an income and or sales tax to reduce pressure on property taxes, okay? And in every state without exception, within 10 years or so,
right up to the same level.
Your property taxes haven't gone down, okay? But the tax that was in for education has now been expanded to another thing, and the tax, instead of being 3%, is now at 6%. And here's the tragedy of this whole thing. Okay, with all that voluminous increase in money, the failure to reduce property taxes, the results to the education system are nil. The student scores didn't go up a notch.
Yeah.
And so the point is, money does not equal adequacy, does not equal education.
Repeat it. 3, we're spending triple the amount of money we're spending in 1970.
Yeah.
And education's quality has
flatlined, right?
Dead flat. It's just ridiculous. And I'm saying, the thing I'm saying, Bob, is that the courts are now using, a whole corrupt theory about education to justify taking power from the legislature. The whole theory of education is corrupt. You can't add money and make education better. You have to make education better.
It's on the legislature. Just like at the federal level, it's on the Congress.
Yes.
They're the culprits here. We elect people who say things that go down and they become part of. They're not the swamp.
Yeah.
Okay? They're the overseers, and they don't.
Yeah.
The swamp is the bureaucracies.
Yeah.
And that's what Trump and Musk are taking apart.
Well, I'm hoping that the heat we're bringing here will reflect on the reps, because it's all in our hands. We can do this.
Totally. And just tell the court.
Where's the gutlessness? Why can't we? I know we've all talked about this, but I mean, what is it? What's it going to take?
Is there fear of consequences? What consequences?
Yeah, but the consequence of having an income tax, that should destroy your career. I mean, what do you think? Yeah. So where does that come from? It's a fearful moment here. But this whole question of money and adequacy. Talk about the adequacy question. What does it even mean? Adequacy. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're talking
I
about
don't think
kids who can't read, they can't read, write, and do math.
Right.
But they're graduating from high school.
Right, and we're paying On average, something like $18,000
not
or $19,000 a year per student.
Yeah, and it's not an adequate amount of money.
Right.
When it gets to $1 million a kid,
Right.
and they still can't read or write, it still won't be enough money, will it?
Right. And they can't read or write.
But the fact is that the courts can't see that, but they somehow think it's their right to come in and start dictating both education policy, but in particular taxation policy.
The legislature allows it. It always comes back to
Well, it's just so stupid. That's my point. It's just stupid. And why does the legislature see how stupid it is?
It's dangerous.
Well, no, that too. But I'm talking about on the part of the legislature. There's nothing to be gained. It's stupid on their part not to take it back.
How many people do you think really sit down and think about the separation of powers and what's happening?
I know.
Okay, if I let the courts dictate that,
Yeah.
that exonerates me from the consequences. No, it doesn't.
No.
Because the court's going to tell you need an income tax
The
or a
triple
sales tax
consequences.
or something,
Yeah,
right?
the triple consequences. It's going to be worse and worse and worse for you.
And so, again, it's at all costs, literally, at all costs, we have to protect the sanctity of the Constitution.
Yes.
That's what's at risk here.
Yeah.
And I would certainly hope that the justices realize that.
Yeah.
You get lost in the weeds, and I don't care what the analysis from the lower court says, this much money, that much. The big picture is you're here to protect that Constitution. You can interpret it, okay, but you don't get to dictate policy and you don't get to dictate financing.
Yeah.
That's the legislature's job. Yeah. You usurp that at the peril of our freedom.
Yeah, Sorg likes, former Honorable Greg Sorg, he likes to refer to that as the camel's nose under the tent, or in the tent.
I would say the moose's nose.
That's actually better when an arc part of the woods, isn't it? Who cares about camels
That's
up
right.
there? Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's I'm afraid it's going to be a moose's head in the windshield the way they're doing it right now.
We'll see.
They better just step up. Is all I can
Citizens need to do their part.
Yeah.
I've said for a year. I spent 12 years in Congress, 6 in the House, 6 in the Senate.
Yeah.
And you cannot cast your vote and think that your obligation as a citizen is over. You can go to the Soviet Union and do that. Okay?
Yeah.
You need to cast your vote and then hold your elected officials' feet to the fire, which means you need to be aware of and educate yourself about the things going on in the House, in the Senate.
As well as educating yourself about the Constitution.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we will start seeing people get elected into these offices that respect and will honor and will fight for that Constitution, that understand the dangers in erasing or blurring the line between the separation of powers.
Yeah.
It's so critical.
So one of the things that I often wondered, but I'm recommending it to people online, and that is, I don't know how many times you were invited into somebody's house in which they had already collected all their friends. But that's what locals should do. They should get all the guys that agree with them on this issue. I'm talking about in the town of Haverhill, and I'm talking about Rick Ladd or whoever your senator is at any given time.
Right.
And I'm saying, can you guys think this way? How do you put pressure on? You bring all your friends who think exactly like this. Get 20 of them in the room and invite that guy. He's not going to say no. He will not say no. I guarantee he will not say no. We yearn for moments like that.
Right.
And you get them in the room and you start putting demands on them to show some guts as to protect our rights to be self-determinative when it comes to education policy and education spending. I'm just going to recommend that in addition to letter writing. It just occurred to me.
Absolutely.
But it stunned me when I was a rep, and I was a rep for 12 years, and it stunned me that nobody ever, not once, invited me into their house to talk about what I was doing.
6 in the House, 6 in the Senate.
And you had the same thing. What is it with us as people? Do we just not care? You're not powerless people. I mean, this is the thing that drives me nuts.
You're in politics, right? So next time you're passing by, please do. No, then that is where your representatives, your senators get the sense of the body. That's why you campaign so hard, My first year campaigning for the Senate, I went to 1,500 houses in 27 towns, okay? And the second term was 1,200, and the third term was 900.
When we were reps,
people knew who I was.
Door to door to door to door.
Right. I wore you out, as I recall.
You did. I actually, believe it or not, before that ever happened, I'd already been in all the homes.
Yeah.
I'd knocked once on every home in my district.
Yeah.
And but numbers of times people said, "You're the first time I've ever seen anybody rep in my doorway."
Right.
But I'm saying it's your fault because you can invite them into your doorway.
Right.
Call them up if they're running.
Absolutely.
But get 20 guys that are thinking like you, because that's the most important thing. Don't get a bunch of guys that are going to take over your house who are little commies or something. But get yourself, and don't depend on the local town hall to
Right.
hold a meeting that
No.
all the reps can go to and say their piece. The only people who show up for those things are people who are already invested in the system in some way.
Paul Revere didn't go to the town hall. He went house to house. He had a gallop, right? The British are coming. The British are coming.
He didn't mess around with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's one by one. Citizens have to become citizens.
Yeah.
And that means doing your part responsibly, studying, learning the Constitution, knowing your reps, how they're voting, know what's coming up, what's important to you, what's important to your future. And
There's
your
so
kids.
much information online, so easy to get access
there is.
to what this, and you can watch the session days. I mean, somebody just sent me, I didn't even know you could do this. Somebody just sent me a recording of what the guys said about their bill in the executive committee.
Oh, sure.
In the executive meeting. It was a Senate meeting, I think, but that's a new thing. It wasn't there when I was there, but man, do we have information now.
Right.
But if you don't know what bills and all that sort of stuff, there are places. I mean, I don't know who to send you to. The House Republican Alliance is a good one for people who are more conservative. Mm-hmm. At least it used to be. I don't know if it still is. I'm trying to think. I really didn't expect this to quite go here, but it's a really important place to go.
Yeah.
It's funny to have a senator here, and we're talking about the people.
That's what it's supposed to be about.
Yeah, it's our government. And at the end of the day, Bob, when the people don't take responsibility, when the thing collapses, it's not your rep who's the problem. It's you not being your own government. You're the government. You own this thing.
Yeah.
And when you don't act, those people are your representatives.
Just
they represent you.
Think of it this way, right? I mean, look at the federal level. How much money do you out of your household send to the federal government or the state government or the county government or your local government, right?
Right.
And so if you had an investment that you're sending that amount of money to, wouldn't you watch it?
Yeah, I know.
Wouldn't you look for the return on investment? What kind of dividends it's paying? And if, as in education, there's no improvement over 40 years, except the costs have tripled.
How do they manage to hide that so effectively?
Because people don't look for it. You have to develop the right metrics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and they're out there, and you can do it
Well,
yourself.
I found the third,
Right.
tripling the expenditures and getting flatlined. I got that. I found that. That was I think it was
People
Cato
want
Institute
other
or something.
people to do the work. And if you're a citizen, that doesn't work. You become a subject.
Yeah.
You become vulnerable if you allow someone else to do the homework you should be doing.
Yeah.
And so, again, we all have demands on our time.
Yeah.
But the single most important thing we can do is preserve the republic and the state, and the rights thereunto.
Yeah. The most beautiful thing I do see in education is homeschoolers.
Yeah.
And I say that, yes, I know they're private schools and all that stuff for the people who can afford it and that. But the homeschoolers are they're real citizens. They say, no more, not with my kids.
Right.
It's my job, they're my kids. And the amazing thing is they have control of the country into the future that they would relinquish to the state schools. And what is state schools going to teach your kids? How to be transgenders? I mean, like,
Right.
or how to have homosexual sex.
Well, I was just flabbergasted when the Supreme Court of New Hampshire ruled in favor of the school district in Manchester, where a girl had been being groomed to transgender without the knowledge of the parents. Right. The parents found out and sued, and the court said the school has a right to withhold that information from the parents.
Yeah.
Who are these judges?
I know.
Okay.
But don't you see what we're heading toward here, though? It just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah,
because why? We trust people. It's not our job to trust
No.
people. It's our job to be on their tails.
Just like Ronald Reagan said to the Russians, right? Trust but verify.
Yeah.
Do your homework.
Yeah.
Do your homework.
Yeah.
Because, we're on the threshold of a potentially disastrous decision if the legislators you have elected don't hold to their oath under the Constitution.
Yeah.
You don't support and defend the cost of education. You don't support and defend teacher salaries. You don't support and defend school. You support and defend the Constitution.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the angles I take on this is that, when it's a republic, that is, when it's been given to us, it's in our hands. It's ours. We are the sovereigns, and we don't do it. I always wonder about God's judgment, and I'm thinking, all this transgender stuff, all the grooming of kids, all the immorality that's being promoted in the schools called sex education, it's on me and you and all the citizens out there who just pretended somehow or other that it wasn't their problem.
Because
But it's us.
People don't send their kids to school. They abandon them to the school.
Well, that's a real thing.
They surrender them to the school. And now the schools are methodically taking over more and more of what parents should be doing.
Yeah.
Sex education. We homeschooled all three of our kids. They're all college grads. They're all doing well. Okay, and
You mean they did get subverted in college?
no, because they had the basis.
Yeah, it's a real thing. That's a real thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So again.
So it's on us. It's on the people, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It's ours to win. It's ours to lose.
Yeah. But you're just reaffirming. We're talking about the major issue being a separation of powers issue. And I'm just actually
couch. And here's the danger here.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Because everybody's wallets are tight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the money is big in your mind. Okay.
Yeah.
And if that is the key issue that you have, you're missing the boat. The court is slowly and treacherously, if I might say so, okay, usurping the authority of the legislators that you elect and send to make the laws and to finance the programs of the state.
Yes.
That's the danger here.
But the thing is interesting, though, is this country is founded on godly principles.
Well, of course.
And with very godly a society in general, relatively speaking, to the world,
I had someone tell me, no, not really. I said, really? Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not, bear false witness. Our laws are basically reflections, Judeo-Christian.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
And so, yes, we are a Christian nation, and yes, those rules, when we ignore them, bring terrible consequences.
Right.
The highest suicide rate in our country is kids from 11 to 14. Yeah, now you got the veterans are a specialized group. They're 22% of those, 22 a day are taking their own lives. But the suicide rate for 11 to 14-year-olds in our country is the highest.
And the analysis gives you what's the cause of that? Hopelessness already? Abandonment by parents to the schools? I mean, what is it? That's
confusion.
Weird. I've never heard that
Moral
number.
confusion, right?
But are they being tempted? I've seen the kids
I don't
are given
know
options.
why. I just know that.
Yeah.
And I can conjecture why, and the why is
yeah.
parents haven't given the kids that solid foundation.
Yeah.
Okay. The schools, now what people don't know, you can have God in schools. Your child can go in and say the Lord's Prayer out loud. You can go in and do it too. Mm-hmm. Teachers can't, principals can't. Okay, which is to me is an anathema because our whole education system originated with the churches.
The whole idea is piety and morality.
Right.
Piety and morality.
Right, as stipulated in the Constitution
Yes.
of our state.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
these problems don't occur in a vacuum. There's something that's a
yeah.
causation. And I think back in, it was in 1973 or so, when not only Roe v. Wade, but they also removed God from schools, about that time frame.
Yeah.
And you start looking at the consequences.
I think it
Come
was
down
even earlier
generation
than
to
that one.
generation,
Big
right?
prayer of the school, 60s, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
again, it didn't remove prayer from schools. They just said that schools couldn't hold prayers. I went to school in Massachusetts, part of my elementary.
Yeah.
It was every day the Lord's Prayer, the 23rd Psalm, okay, Pledge of Allegiance, and the preamble to the Constitution. Every single day.
Really?
Absolutely.
Really?
Massachusetts.
Preamble to the Constitution.
Yeah.
Wow.
We the people of the United States, right? Blah, blah, blah.
What an amazing thing. Yeah.
So,
Well, no, my point was, though, that you understand that in every way, when things go sideways, it's on us. And I'm saying you can't just hold your reps. You can get mad at your reps if you didn't do a dang thing to hold their feet to the fire. And the fact
just
is,
voting is not enough.
we can't even get mad at the courts if we don't do anything. That's why you and I are sitting here, though.
right.
And we mean to keep doing this. And I hope that you guys out there, we have about 2 minutes left, Bob, but I hope that people out there will broadcast this. We'll put these kinds of information. And we have 6 videos now. And all we're doing is we're just turning it up. We're just trying to make sure this is covered on an everyday basis because this is that bad. And I'm saying I'm doing my citizen thing. And could you guys out there, if you just minimally, just send this to your mailing list, These are YouTube videos.
Right.
Just make a link and send it to your mailing list. New Hampshire, I think it's New Hampshire Claremont Decisions. Just all you have to look up online to find this. But do you see what I'm saying? I'm not the guy who. In fact, I was a state rep, and I was a state rep because I knew that the guy that had been in before me despised our Constitution. He had no respect for it. He wound up working for USA.
Your name is Paul revere Ingbretson.
But everybody has the same name.
Right.
That's
right.
just a,
you
that's
need,
a citizen
You need to do
actions.
your part as a citizen.
Yeah.
You've got to do your part. Without that, we lose it.
Read your history. Read Sam Adams, all these guys, the activism. And Sam Adams was the guy that I think organized the Tea Party. Yeah. Who knew? You know?
Right.
You know, he was a tax collector, actually. He was a failed tax collector. He wasn't good when people couldn't deal with it. But anyway, Bob, thank you for being here. I'm trying to think, is there anything we should really... Oh, I want you to read that letter again. Would you mind doing
sure.
that?
I'd love it.
If you want to end with something else before that.
And I'm happy to deliver it to the Speaker and the Senate President.
Yeah.
I'll do that. I mean, I know them both.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick story. Do I have time to tell a story
about
about
time.
Sherman?
Yes,
okay,
time.
so
Yeah.
I'm a freshman in the Senate, in the House, 2001 or 2, and the Transportation Committee, which Sherman was chairman of, brings in a bill, right? Mm-hmm. Right after 9/11, saying...
There go your rights, and it's good.
We need to have biometric data on all our driver's licenses. Came out of the committee 20-0. Ought to pass.
Oh, gee.
Got to the floor for the vote. I got up to speak. 2 minutes. I said, really?
Yeah.
Do you think for a second that any of the terrorists would have had a driver's license? Or would have driven fast enough? They were very careful to get caught. And oh, by the way, they can generate a driver's license with better accuracy than the Department of Transportation can. Okay, then the motor vehicles is actually part of the state police. Yeah. So this is a waste of time. It's going to increase costs and burdens on our citizens. It's not going to do a thing to make us more safe or secure.
Right.
Bill went down.
Yeah. Just like taking away guns doesn't make anybody more secure.
No.
For the same exact reasons. Right. And taking away the legislature's power to determine education policy and education funding is not making education better. It hasn't got a prayer of doing that.
So let me read the letter.
And I appreciate your being here today.
Let me read this real quick.
Yes, I really want you to read this. Read it. Take your time. Read it.
Honorable Justices, as the elected leaders of the New Hampshire House and Senate, we, the undersigned, write to inform you that the legislative branch will not be implementing the court's recent ruling on education funding as adjudicated in the Conval lawsuit. We do so to remind the court that the New Hampshire Constitution clearly and unambiguously assigns the issue of taxation and education funding to the legislature. Were we to comply with your decision, we would be subjecting the citizens of New Hampshire to a dangerous precedent by allowing the judiciary to usurp the exclusive constitutional authority of the legislature in such matters. The House and Senate, duly elected by the people of New Hampshire, will retain exclusive jurisdiction over matters of fiscal policy. Respectfully, Sherman Packard, Speaker of the House. Sharon Carson, President, New Hampshire Senate.
It's time for that.
I'm going to take it down.
What's so difficult about that? I mean, I'm thinking about that.
Now, again, that's if the court rules against the Constitution, my words, okay?
Well,
if they rule for the Conval decision.
Which is just an increase in funding they're demanding the House pay.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So
most people need to know we haven't addressed the Conval thing much.
Right.
But you can look that up. There's plenty of information out there. You can see what the court's decisions so far have been. They've been holding on to that for several years. But that's where we've been. Yeah, do that, Bob. Look see if there's anything else you actually wanted to fit in. We can get it in. We can get it in if there's something else you actually want to make a point about.
I keep coming to separation of power, separation of power, separation of power.
Well, it's nothing else. It's the thing. I was really appreciative, though. We got to get to talk extendedly about the money aspects and the fact that it doesn't do a dang thing. And get out of here. Don't be stealing stuff for a false premise. I mean, by the way, if it was even plausible, they still wouldn't have the right to do it. But it's not plausible that it's going to change education.
In the final analysis, this will be the court telling the legislature to impose a tax.
Yes. Pure and simple.
Plain and simple.
And how much?
Right.
Or how minimal, how much?
But how much to raise with it? It's like, no.
Yeah. So isn't that back in that place where somebody said, not only do they tell you to jump and you jump, but instead of responding, you say how high?
How high,
yeah,
right.
All the House is doing is asking how high?
Right.
I mean, how stupid are we? I mean, what kind of a legislature is this? I'm waiting for every single one of them, including Democrats. I mean, step up and stop being idiots. What's the fun of even being in the legislature once you strip your power and give it to the courts?
No.
And where are they going to stop? They're already involved in other areas. We all know that. But
right.
Bob, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah. If you're as concerned as we are with the loss of the legislature's control over policy and taxation in New Hampshire and wish to help, please share these podcasts with as many people as you can, and then consider donating so we can bring you and your friends even more of the important facts concerning our Supreme Court's Claremont decisions.